Director has yet to answer, and I was particularly struck by the specific question on whether there were parameters, planning, or protocols changed by the Secret Service when they determined that there was actual threat by Iran, and there was no answer to that.
I think, I understand her not wanting to give too much away because obviously bad actors are watching this and you want to protect some information. But I do think it helps to answer directly. You can give, and you and I were talking offline, you can say, yes, there were. I just can't give to the specifics. And, I think people are looking for transparency and you want to find that balance. But there are a lot of questions that are still unanswered. When you do a site plan, to explain it to people to understand. The staff picks a place. We're going to go to Butler. We're going to do open rally. Okay, they put a Secret Service team together. There's a lead, which is the person in charge of the overall thing. That's motorcade route site. Then there's a site agent. That agent is in charge of that site, Butler. Now, within that site agent, you get CS, counter sniper. You'll get a tactical, maybe. But you'll get all these different elements. And then together you put a security plan. So at this point, I understand that there's investigation, and I'm not sure why she's not able to say certain things that I can't say. But at this point, you do know what was requested. And she did say nothing was denied in this specific scenario. So when I hear that, clearly there was a line-of-sight issue. So then if she's saying nobody ever asked us for this, meaning when they say asked us, meaning the field team there, then my next question would be, who did it? And why did they not ask? And then did you speak to them? So it was interesting. They asked her, did you speak with the sniper who took the shot? She said yes. They didn't ask her, did you speak with the agents that put the plan together? Specifically, it's going to be one agent, the site, and then the lead advance. So I would want to know what that plan was in place and why. I mean, it really is a simple question. Why wasn't that rooftop secured? And she couldn't answer that. She couldn't, right? She
in fact,
in
multiple times she was saying, we're still doing a review. We're waiting on a final report. There are multiple ongoing investigations. That was the answer instead of a more direct answer to these specific questions about how this could happen and where was the failure specifically. As we're continuing to listen in, by the way, she was asked whether she should resign. In fact, she was challenged to do just that by Mike Turner, a Republican on this committee. And she has since responded that she is the best person she believes to continue to lead the agency. Evie, one of the things we were talking about going into this hearing and we heard addressed right at the top of the questioning was the resource issue. She talked about it in her opening statements about not having enough resources, enough manpower. And then we heard that, the budget for the Secret Service has gone up over the past 10 years from $1.8 billion to $3.1 billion. To the average person, that sounds like a lot of money.
That's a year, right?
Right, but you say that's still not enough.
It's not enough. And she did something really smart at the beginning. And I think when you come in with numbers and facts, it kind of hushes things down. She said since January 1st, and I wrote it down, we've secured 7,500 sites. 7,500 sites. So I want you to think about the manpower and what that takes. Then on top of that, we're protecting currently 36 people, 36, and that is not counting all the foreign heads of state who come. They also just did the NATO summit, which is massive. The RNC, they're going to do the DNC, and then UNGA. UNGA is United Nations General Assembly, where you've got over 100-plus foreign heads of state coming. That costs a lot of money, and that requires manpower. So I think numbers are good so that people can understand.
And then full-time, 36 individuals protected on a daily basis with 8,000 employees. The director was saying that in an ideal world, that would be about 9,600 employees.
To clarify with the employees, when she's saying employees, she's saying 8,000. I would want to know how many of these are agents, because there's civilian positions. They even have mechanics who work on the cars. So there's those positions. And I would actually want to know what they should have asked, how many agents do you have? Because it's the agents that are the ones running around doing protection, doing the advances. That's what I want to know.
Again, she says she believes she's the best person to lead this agency. She talked about how she worked her way up through the ranks.
She did.
She's been within. She knows it well. She's been there a long time. Do you think she's done enough in this hearing to give the American people confidence in her leadership?
You know what's interesting, and I don't know how to answer this question because as I watch it, she's both a Secret Service member, but she's also dealing in this political world. And I've seen these before. Like I've seen Secretary Mayorkas when he testifies, and when I'm I'm hearing her. I hear him. I hear a lot of his answers. So,
and he's her boss.
And he's her boss. So I don't know. Obviously, there's a discussion there. So I don't know how they're supposed to answer when they go to these hearings. Do the American people want clear answers? Yes. Should they get them? Yes. But then when you go to this arena, which is such a strange arena, is this the way she's supposed to answer? Is this how she's briefed to answer? Is this what is appropriate for these types of scenarios? That's where I kind of come in, and as a human being, I'd say, look, these are the assets I had. This is what I was given. This is what was done. That's where I'm not sure in a setting like this, is this the way you're schooled? And you might know better. Is this how they're supposed to answer?
I don't know how they're supposed to answer. What she has said is not satisfying when it comes to giving transparent information about what happened.
No.
And at least providing the light on the situation that helps us understand what happened and why. And that's what's still missing.
I think what's missing, too, they did hit her on the response, the latter part, where they said, why did it take so long? Because ideally they were on stage. It was very heroic. They hunkered him down, but then there's that moment where he's actually standing up. And we do know the shooter was neutralized, and we hear that, but then you don't know. When it's all real time, you don't know what you're dealing with. So the other question is that protocol for him to be up and above, standing out there, not knowing if there's a second shooter? There is no way to know in that moment that there is no second shooter. Impossible. So that's a red flag. Why did that happen? And then there's so many. When you do these advances, there's layer upon layer upon layer, so that if there's a threat, something catches it. Something catches it, and you see many moments here where nothing was caught. She is trying to explain the difference between someone being a suspect and someone being a threat. Or being suspicious, rather. Excuse me. There's so many people that appear suspicious. So I think, and what she may not be saying here, is that the Secret Service knew there was a suspicious person. That is not enough to not let the president go on stage. That suspicious people are everywhere. I think if they knew, she said, we didn't know he was a threat.
Threat, right.
There is a difference.
Ali Vitali, stay with us. Evie Pomporas, thank you so very much for being with us this morning. Really appreciate it. We're also following new developments this morning after President Biden decided to bow out of the 2024 campaign and endorse Vice President Harris. Later this hour, the Vice President will be making her first public appearance. Since that announcement, we will bring you her remarks live when she speaks at a White House event celebrating college athletes.
NBC News has also learned the Vice President spent more than 10 hours on the phone yesterday calling party leaders, members of Congress, governors, and leaders of advocacy and civil rights organizations. And then just in the last hour, more Democratic representatives, senators and governors have all been lining up behind Vice President Harris, who says she intends to work for and to earn the Democratic nomination.
We have also heard from former President Trump after President Biden's announcement. Trump spoke to NBC News, calling Biden the worst president in the history of the United States. NBC's Monica Alba is joining us now from the White House. NBC's Ali Vitali is on Capitol Hill, along with Tyler Pager, White House reporter for the Washington Post, and Amna Nawaz, co-anchor of the PBS NewsHour. Also, Julian Castro, former Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. And Monica, let me start with you. We have all this reporting about two calls the White House Chief of Staff held today. What are you learning about them?
Yeah, that's right, Jose. After the president made this monumental decision yesterday, really it was just a tight group of senior leadership that knew right before it was posted on social media. So it really caught a lot of people, the rank and file White House staffers, even the campaign staffers who've been working on this effort for years, off guard. They were a little bit surprised because they had been told in the lead up to this announcement that the president had already made his decision, that he wanted to stay in the race and that he was committed to that plan. So now that everything has shifted, you are seeing people like the White House Chief of Staff hold these calls to really thank the team, I'm told, but also to stress there is more work to be done to try to focus on these next couple of months, even though, of course, the dynamic has shifted so dramatically. And what was interesting is that from his official perch, the White House Chief of Staff can't discuss the 2024 race in any real detail, but he did say on this call, I'm told, that the White House counsel had advised him to be sure not to talk about whoever the next president may be, quote, whomever she is. So a reference there, obviously, to the fact that the president has fully endorsed his vice president, Kamala Harris, here. And you're right that we're going to be hearing from her shortly. She's going to be doing an event that normally President Biden would be doing on the South Lawn with the NCAA championship teams from the last year or so. So we expect that she will speak generally about the president and maybe his historic decision here, but this is not going to be her moment for communicating about how she views her specific backing now and her role as the potential nominee here as that continues to be lined up and as we see others coalescing around her and endorsing her. So from the White House side of things, Jose, I think you can expect there will be a continued try to pivot back to business as usual, which is, of course, difficult after things have changed again here so significantly. And similarly, on the Biden campaign side of things, we know that there have been calls from the senior leadership there to the staff to let them know that they still have their jobs. In effect, it's moving over to the Harris for President apparatus, even though there could be some new faces that are injected into the team as well, we expect. But both of those teams are all waiting to see what Vice President Harris is going to say and do in this key moment. And we know that she already has some travel scheduled for the coming week. She's supposed to be heading to Milwaukee tomorrow, and you can expect her to really return to a little bit of the campaign trail in the more traditional sense. She thought she was going to be doing that to support President Biden. Now she's going to be going out and talking about why she thinks people should rally around her as a Democratic nominee. As you mentioned there, she says, and according to people close to her, she really wants to talk about earning this nomination and working for it. And as you implied, she has been working the phones yesterday, hours and hours, more than 100 calls with people like former President Obama, former President Clinton, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, dozens of lawmakers and key stakeholders who will be critical to this conversation as it moves ahead.
So much has been happening in less than 24 hours since this announcement. Allie, we've seen dozens and dozens now of lawmakers come and back Harris following President Biden's lead. In just recent hours, we saw top House Democratic leaders, specifically Pete Aguilar and Catherine Clark, endorsing Harris. We've seen governors also back her. A couple of missing names, though, so far are Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi, current leader of the Democratic Party in the House, Hakeem Jeffries, along with Senator Chuck Schumer, the majority leader in the Senate. Help us understand the dynamics and what those leaders might be waiting on.
Well, those leaders are in the position of having to be representative, in the case of Jeffries and Schumer, of where the rest of their caucus is. And this is a travel-in day. Democrats are not all back in town, though many of them are back for key hearings, like the Secret Service one that you and I have been covering and that I'm standing outside of. But I think for Jeffries and for Schumer, it's important for them to be reflective of where their entire caucuses are. So that's at least my guess as to why we haven't seen them come out with more full-throated endorsements of Vice President Kamala Harris. To that end, though, both of those leaders did speak to her yesterday in her many, many phone calls that she was making around Capitol Hill and around the country and various parts of the Democratic apparatus. That said, key caucuses on Capitol Hill have already thrown their support behind her. Dozens of individual Democrats have said that they are going to endorse her and don't want this to be a free-for-all open process. When you look at the fact that many of the governors who have backed her, from Gretchen Whitmer to Andy Beshear to Gavin Newsom, all of these are people who were also in the conversation around who could be the nominee if it wasn't President Biden. By Biden throwing his support behind Harris and then watching all of these leaders fall in line, it makes it so that the jockeying is not for the top spot, but really for the second slot as vice president to the now vice president. And I think what's important here is on a delegate tracking metric, yes, you want to see all of these key party leaders